My name is Alex Mauisnake Ellenberg. I am a broadcast talent for CSGO events.
I think it was pretty obvious, considering what my job is, that when it came time to do an entire season on That's My Job, esports broadcasting was probably going to get thrown into the mix. But I wanted to focus not necessarily on a shoutcaster, but on an analyst role. Because I think a lot of people don't really understand what goes into being an analyst on broadcast, but more importantly, just overall, I don't think a lot of esports fans understand what esports broadcasting actually looks like. I've done so many seasons of this podcast where we've delved specifically into esports broadcasting. I've spoken to lots of shoutcasters, but this time I wanted to chat to one of the best, I think, in CounterStrike, Mauisnake. Someone I got to work with way back when it was the Rio Major, the Americas RMR. He was on the desk and I was so excited because he is one of the analysts that I love to watch. I find him so funny. I love he's got a quirkiness to him that really shines on a desk, and I was so excited to work with him. I later got to work with him during the Paris Major, and I just think he's really interesting in how he chooses to do things. And I also think that he has an understanding of what this job takes, considering how he got to the place he got. So we're going to chat to Mauisnake for this episode, and I think you're going to be really interested in what he has to say. Okay, Mauisnake, so other than fighting with professional players on Twitter, can you explain to us exactly what it is you do?
Yeah, sure. So I am a broadcast talent for CSGO events. I would say that it's almost entirely CSGO events. There was a period of time early on when I was sort of flirting with the idea of doing more Valorant, which I actually am still open to the option of doing, but it's more or less just CSGO at this point. And in the last year, I'll say year and a couple months, I've done practically every role, actually every real broadcast role. I was an interviewer, I was a host. I'm most often on the desk as an analyst, but I've also done commentating as recently as the most recent spring finals, where I was tri-casting in the grand finals.
So I'm curious, which is your favorite role on broadcast?
Ooh, I kind of hate that question because I actually really find myself in a grass is greener moment a lot of the time where I look at the other roles and I think of all of the perks of those. I would say that I am best on the desk. I'd say that that's for certain. I would usually say because I'm best at it that it's my favorite because I can, to me, it's easiest because I can kind of just do my normal routine of prep and I can get myself ready for it. Whereas I'm still kind of figuring out the kinks of some of the other roles. I would say it's safe to say that commentary is probably like 1B, whereas analyst is 1A for me. And then between interviewer and host, I actually think interviewer is my least favorite job. I think that's the one where I was like, okay, I'm not really too into this one because you're just kind of waiting on players and sometimes they don't give you anything, even if you have good questions for them.
So that's interesting because for me, I mean, I've dabbled in commentary and I know I'm shockingly bad at it. As fun as it is, I just don't have it. But I've done the desk hosting and the interviewing, and for me, interviewing is my favorite job to do. But I know I'm not always good at it because I find like the questions that I think are interesting, people are like, "Who cares?" Whereas for me, I'm like, "I think this is fascinating. I'd like to talk to you about." What you ate for breakfast. I'm just throwing that out there, but that sort of thing. So do you think for you, like you said, like that you're the best on the desk? Do you find that sometimes you end up in a role that maybe it's not necessarily your favorite, but you know that this is what you're good at, so you're putting a lot more focus into that?
Uh, well, I mean, I wanted to be an analyst coming into the space. I would say so it was I'm where I wanted to be. If I looked at myself 4 years ago and say, what am I working towards? What am I trying to achieve? I have achieved all of that. So that is in no way do I feel like I'm getting forced into a role just because I'm good at it. I hone my skills to become good at it. So I very purposefully pushed myself in this direction. So I wouldn't really say that. No, I wouldn't. I wouldn't. I mean, yeah, I think I'm happy with it. Yeah.
So why an analyst? And also, actually, before we get into why an analyst, explain to someone watching who knows absolutely nothing about CS:GO, what exactly is an analyst's role?
That's a great question because I think that if you ask every analyst in the top tier of CS:GO broadcasting what an analyst is supposed to do, I think that we'd all have different answers. I think Maniac, Yenko, Pimp, they'd all have different answers than what I would have to say. And I'll just give it because I have a very I would say American viewpoint on what an analyst is supposed to do because for one, really dislike the term analyst because it actually forces the person into a direction that I don't necessarily agree with in terms of entertainment value. Because, and this is something that I think is going to be a theme throughout this entire interview, I view this as the entertainment industry. I will always like gravitate towards that as opposed to what the term analyst means to me because I was studying to be an NBA analyst. Like I was trying to be an NBA analyst in college, and that's like using stats, using regressions, using our, big spreadsheets and trying to sift through data to try to figure something out. So when the term analyst is used for someone that's on a broadcast, I'm a bit turned off by it because it sounds so unsexy. But what I would say an analyst is, to get back to your actual question, is that I think an analyst is someone that is a pundit, a talking head. It's someone that's supposed to rile up the crowd, give opinions, give don't be don't be untrue with what it is that you're saying to try to just stir the pot, but also be willing to go out on a limb and create a little bit of controversy just so that people have something to gravitate towards. Because in my opinion, an analyst isn't someone that's supposed to just read stats out and push narratives that we all are already familiar with. An analyst is supposed to be someone that interprets that information and interprets what they're seeing in the game from interviews, from these narratives that we all know, and then actually has some sort of conclusion or pushes the narrative into a new direction entirely. So that's kind of my idea behind what an analyst is. It's to accentuate the broadcast by giving someone's opinion who is an expert in this field and is trusted in this field, and then interpreting the data in a way that might be unique or funny or really just enhances the viewing experience.
I agree with you, and I do think that the word analyst, like you said, it demeans the role to a degree. It kind of puts it in a box when it is a lot more than that. But I'm curious, why did you decide that this was the role you wanted to do? You mentioned that you sort of focused in on this, you honed your skills. Why analyst?
I think analysts actually have a lot to give in terms of this space. Personally, the reason that I really focused on this space or focused on the analyst role is because I felt like the commentary space is already oversaturated with very good commentators. But I think that when I was really coming up in the space, when I was becoming a fan of CSGO, as opposed to when I was a fan of CS Source way back when, I looked at the analyst desk and I thought to myself that this is a role that could fit me. This is a role that I could do some damage in. This is a role where I could really just like shift I could lead to this role actually changing. And because I have these American sensibilities of what it took, what an analyst should do. And when I was watching these desks in CSGO, back at, 7, 8 years ago before I was a player in this space or like someone that was working these top tier events, I would see it and I was like, I just don't find these that entertaining. I just don't actually think that this is really providing me with any value. And so, and that's me kind of looking at American sports and I'm saying that these guys on desks are consistently entertaining me. They're consistently funny. They're consistently throwing out a take that makes me question what I'm seeing in the game. And that's what I knew I was going to do, and that's what I'm here to do. I'm here to shift the conversation, and I'm here to stir things up a little bit because I'm just watching the game, and I'm not going to just push the stats. I'm going to do something different.
So it's interesting that you say that because like I hate the comparison to traditional sports because I do feel like esports sits in its own space. But the truth is, like I know the same sort of thing when I was watching CounterStrike. Sometimes I would get very bored on desks. There were certain personalities that I would watch that I knew would be entertaining, but there were other times where I felt like it was a very generic. These are the questions we're going to ask. This is what's going to happen. And like the joke is always, oh, you mute the desk. But I do think that became a standard thing because maybe we were very focused on the numbers and not necessarily on opinions. Why do you think that needs to change? What is it that needs to change on a desk to make it a more entertaining product? And why does that have to happen?
It should happen because we're trying to push this space further than where it's at. And if everybody is up there, and if AI can do your job, you're not doing a job. Like that's my opinion. Like if you're up there to recite stats from box scores, if you're up there to just say very lukewarm, like milk toast statements, then that's not for me. That's why no one cares what the desk is saying a lot of the time. But I know for sure that people are they're latching themselves onto what I'm saying, whether that's for better or for worse. And I'm willing to be a lightning rod. And that's where okay, so for to get back to your question, why does this need to happen? Because esports has so much more to give, and it can grow into such a different product entirely, that if it doesn't, to me, and it just stagnates, I think that stagnation almost equates to, in modern business terms, as like decline, even though it's not true. But the thing is that if you always actually look towards any other industry, they'll think that a bad year, unless they've been in the red over and over again, basically, like, if they just break even, they're probably like, geez, like, that's not great for us. Like, some industries are happy, like ones that are funded by VC are probably really happy by that. But one that wants to eventually be sustainable in its own right needs to provide value. And I personally just don't think there's value in pushing the common narrative all the time.
So we could sit and spend a lot of time discussing what we think the perfect Counter-Strike desk would look like, because I think we have very similar opinions on it. But I actually want to delve into your job specifically. So here's my thing. You're sitting at home and one day you go, I want to be an analyst on broadcast. Surely it's not as easy as that. I mean, what was your starting point in Counter-Strike?
So, I could get into like a lot of different points at this one, but I'll cut it off to this point, where basically in 2015-16, I was, like I said, I was studying to be an NBA analyst. I was studying stats at Columbia University, and then I started watching. Someone told me just get into the esports club at Columbia, and I was like, okay, let's do it. I could tell that, or they wanted to have a Counter-Strike team. I knew I was still decent at it because I played competitive Source back when I was in middle school and high school. And so a lot of that muscle memory was still there. It's a lot of like the tactical ideas, because I've worked with teams that were pretty tactical, surprisingly, at that time. And so I had this like foundational knowledge. And to me, as soon as I started playing for a little bit, I started recognizing the scale of the space, because I think this was around the time of, let's say, like Columbus, when the prize pool started getting to $1 million, and I was like, okay, this is serious business now. This is like, esports has really popped off since I stopped paying attention to it as much. I was watching a lot of Dota. Like, I actually was a really big Dota person from 2013 till basically whenever I became a tier one CS person, because there's only just so much time in the day, and I don't really focus on Dota as much anymore. But it was like, it was basically when I was playing in college, when I was like, geez, I don't know if I can actually play this game for 40 hours in a week. Like, I just simply don't think I can sit in front of a screen and just grind this game, because the I mean, yeah, and I kind of also was like, going into it like, I don't want to be a pro player. I know what that takes because I was exposed to it when I was pretty young. And to me, it feels like if you're going to be a pro player, you should probably get in when you're like 18 to 22. And I was, well, technically I was 21, 22 at that time, but I was like, I think I've already kind of missed the window for myself. And so what I did is I very consciously went into CSGO with the idea that I want to be broadcast talent. So pretty much immediately, I started making YouTube content. I started trying to cast at the amateur level. I did keep competing because I know that gives credibility in the space, and I felt like I had the capabilities to compete to a high enough level eventually that I would put some respect on my own name. And I think I did achieve that, having played 5 seasons in the ESL Challenger League, what was then called ESEA Mountain Dew League, also at one point called ESEA Premier, whatever. The division right beneath ESL Pro League. I played 5 divisions in that, made playoffs one time. And so I think that gives a lot of credit to me, because I would say that if like the layman kind of comes across what I do, and then they're like, why should I trust this guy? It's like, well, I was playing in the league that like Swag and Steel and like all like Henny, like all of these people were playing against me at certain points in time. And so obviously, like, I knew what it was to compete at that level. Like, I played scrims and even matches against like Rogue when Cadian was in North America. I was playing against Complexity when like Ye and Stanislaw were on the team. I'd scrimmed against MIBR when Tarek and Stewie, before they were even announced on the team. Like, I had to like keep away some roster leaks in North America because I was scrimming against those guys, and I don't want to get blacklisted by teams. So I felt like that was one way to prop up my credibility because I think a lot of people in North America, once I did that, were like, okay, that guy can be our guy because he actually competed. He's not just talking out of his ass, and he's not somebody that just somehow came into this space and was like a broadcast focused person, even though I was. Like, even though I came into the space wanting to just do broadcast work, I knew that this was something that was essential to, one, learn about the game too, and two, just gain cred.
So it's interesting though from a broadcast point of view, because this happens a lot where you see people go, okay, I want to be a commentator. I play X amount of, CounterStrike every single day. I'm very, very good. I love it. I can analyze the game and I want to do it. But actually, when it comes down to it, maybe they just don't have, because there is a thing that you need. You need to be able to stand in front of a camera. You need to be able to enunciate words, things like that. Were you confident from the get-go, I know that I'm broadcast ready, or did you have to do any preparation for that?
I did a lot of amateur casting work at the same time. So I would cast on my own Twitch channel. I was casting a lot of Premiere even around the same time that I was playing in it. Basically, as soon as my team got bounced in the group stage or whatever, or the playoffs, then I would just start casting the rest of the games. I would try to keep that up. But if I'm being honest, I've been broadcast ready for probably like 15 years. I've been doing working on radio. I worked on live radio for when I was in actually I was actually I think I was like 12 years old, if even that, when I was selected to work for a local, like, well, a public radio station in the Bay Area. And so I was actually I was putting together packages reporting on uh, like green initiatives that were happening in the Bay Area. Like I would go to different locations and I would report on stuff. So I got actually a lot of reps in very early in terms of delivery. Uh, I've worked at like, funny, actually, I'm staying in Midtown Manhattan right now, and I used to work in the 30 Rock Rockefeller Center, like when I was in college just over 10 years ago. So like I was working on some of their programs like uh, Brian Williams, Rock Center with Brian Williams. I was working on Dateline. Like I was working behind the camera. I was getting to interact with a lot of people that were in front of the camera. And so like I knew what those people had in terms of that little bit of juice that other people maybe weren't exposed to earlier on, because I think a lot of people in the esports space are kind of like just taken up. Like they're just like, oh, they can talk in interviews. Like let's see if they can do it on a desk, you know? But it's like, no, I've actually worked in front of cameras, behind cameras before. I've worked in the entertainment industry for now over 10 years. So did I get better over the last 3 years, 4 years with all the reps that I've been putting in at these events? Of course. Like I look back at my work. Actually, I have a hard drive where I save some of my earliest broadcasts, and I'm just like, okay, like my body language wasn't as pronounced. The way that I would deliver opinions, sometimes I trail off at the end at the end of my sentences. I wouldn't say it with that same amount of punch. I had some ticks in the way that I just would speak when I'm speaking at length that I've now eliminated. So there were a lot of things in terms of getting better, which is going to naturally happen. But I would say that what I did at Epicenter in 2019 when I was tapped by Thorin, who, by the way, I am eternally grateful for. Like, Thorin put me on entirely. He was the person in 2018 that put me on one of his podcasts early on. He was one of the people that was pushing my stuff when I was making those YouTube videos, when I was trying to become a personality in the space. But even at that event, when I still watch back what I did at it, like I was succinct. I was good at delivering the ideas that I wanted to. I actually made a couple jokes early on. Like I compared Stanislaw to an emotionally unavailable boyfriend on like my first desk. Like I was bringing stuff to the broadcast that I knew was unique because I was relating it to my real life experiences. Not that I'm still an emotionally unavailable partner, but you know what I mean? Like I was trying to make sure that I brought some fun and some personality immediately out the gates, but I've obviously gotten much better uh, over the years.
Do you think that the debate about, because I've heard this debate a lot where the idea is eventually esports won't need sort of esports passionate people, not necessarily gamers. The argument is to have a good broadcast, you can bring in someone who's broadcast ready, who's trained, and they'll probably be able to put on a more entertaining show. They don't necessarily have to love the game or know the game. Do you think that that's the case? Because everyone I speak to, I mean, I'm obviously speaking to a lot of people outside of esports broadcasting for this season, but I've spoken to a lot of broadcasters. Everyone starts with the passion for the game first and foremost. Do you think it's possible to transition into an esports broadcast role if you don't have that passion?
Um, yes, I do. Because I think that some of the ways that certain broadcasts are carried out, I would say that certain products, like what I've heard from the League of Legends side of things, what I even would say is more in the vein of what Blast want to carry out on their broadcast, is that it's very regimented, is that they structure what's going to be said before it's said, as opposed to ESL, which is a lot more free flowing, a lot more dynamic. They're ready to just go off the rails to actually let someone indulge in a rant. That the ones that are more regimented, more structured, could honestly they could insert anybody there that just has broadcast experience because they're just going to tell them what to say and they're never going to go off the rails. But you might see the cracks in a if the host or if another analyst tests that person for whatever reason, which would be throwing them under the bus. Like literally, it would just definitely throw them under the bus. But I would say like that's actually what happens in I know you don't like the traditional sports like comparison, but that's like what happens with people like say Stephen A. Smith, where his passion was basketball coming into the space, but then ESPN loved him so much, so they've started putting him on every sport, and it's kind of obvious he doesn't know those sports as well, but he still has that entertainment value that makes him incredibly valuable when he is on those shows. So yeah, I think that it's totally possible. I mean, like let's just be real, a lot of like the people that are more mobile in this space, a lot of people like not saying you're one of these people, but
But
like I'm
I
saying like
mean,
hosts just jump around a lot, and I think the host role is one that actually allows you to do that because you're supposed to be someone that's a little bit clueless. Like you're supposed to be a little like I'm not okay. I wouldn't say clueless. I would say curious. You're supposed to be someone that's curious, and if you bring in that curiosity, that's good. I think actually my favorite example of this is Machine when he moved from Call of Duty to Dota, and myself and many of my own friends, when we were watching that, we saw Machine in the first couple segments, and we were like, "Who is this guy?" And we were the virgin neck beards that were literally like ready to tear anybody down, which is the entire Dota community to this day. And we were like, "Is this guy really got it? This guy really gonna help this broadcast?" But the way that he interacted with some of the analysts, who personally I wasn't even a huge fan of, but what Machine was able to bring out of them very early on because of his natural curiosity and aptitude on broadcast made him an asset and made him, in my opinion, the best Dota host very quickly. Like he surpassed a lot of the people in that space within probably 3 to 6 months because he brought something out of those analysts that other people that were more endemic to the game did not. So yes, I do believe that people could just kind of hop from game to game. I don't know about analysts. I think analysts is probably where you wouldn't want necessarily to just bring any talking head over, but like interviewers, hosts, um, maybe play-by-play commentators. But if you want color commentators and desk analysts, it's a little bit more difficult to slot somebody in there that doesn't really follow the game or hasn't been for, say, a few years.
it's interesting because I mean, 100%. I've jumped from game to game. I've shared this with you. I've always said this publicly. CounterStrike was my jam, but breaking into CS is highly competitive from a broadcast point of view. There are so many people who went in. So I was always told jump around, hone your skills, which I do think helped because I think changing it up, working with different analysts, working with different people in different games, understanding that is really good. And obviously, when you then come to where you are, ironically, I'm jumping all over the place, but the traditional sports, as much as I don't like the comparison, I do think you get better at your job in esports watching traditional sports broadcasters because they are phenomenally good at what they do. But I am curious in terms of talking about breaking into the space because you mentioned Thorin. Like Thorin has helped me. I've had help from Red Eye as well. But and when I say help, it's those people sort of giving you the shout out, giving you some guidance. Is it coming down to say a lucky break or that one opportunity in order to break into the space if someone wants to get into esports broadcasting? Because that is, I think, a question that comes up a lot is how high is the barrier to entry? And I do think maybe specifically in Counter-Strike, there is quite a high barrier to getting to the point where you're going to get paid and make a living from doing this.
The what can I say about this? I would say that some of the talent that we've seen sort of come and go and not find as consistent footing in the space, I would say that I would say they only have themselves to blame. Because if you get your break, and you will, like I've seen people get breaks when they've done way less than what I did, and then they didn't nail it, and they weren't really ready, and then they didn't really keep up the grind. They didn't keep up whatever got them there in the first place, and then they fell off completely. And so if you put yourself out there enough, people will be attracted to your personality enough to give you a shot. And that might take a while. It might honestly take years. Like for me, it took roughly like because I was doing it from 2016 to 2019, and I was trying like everything in the space. So, but eventually, I got my chance in 2019, and I thankfully was able to like, get my foot in the door in a lot of spaces very quickly because people liked what I brought. But if you don't, maybe you weren't ready for it, and maybe you're not cut out for it because if but the thing is that if you aren't getting hit up by those other TOs, if you're not getting a second chance, it is up to you to try to keep putting yourself out there in the space to keep your name in the conversation. When I worked my first event, I didn't slow down on making videos. I made more videos. I was making as many, if not more, for some time after that. I kept trying to put out myself as a player in the space. I kept competing. I kept competing even for a bit after I got my first S tier event. So I was trying to make sure that like, no, I'm going to insert myself. And now that the door is just lightly cracked open, I'm like flinging it open. Like I'm making sure that I'm all the way in. And I think that some people make the mistake that they think that because the most visibility they're ever going to get in their lives is probably that broadcast, they think it all boils down to that, but it's not. There's so much more accessory work you can do, like starting a podcast, like starting a YouTube series, like streaming, like competing, like there's so many different ways that you can show that you are a valuable or you could be valuable on a broadcast. And so it does come down to getting that break, and like I said, it can take a long time, but once you get that break, that's on you.
And what would you say are like the three most important things that you need if you want to be? Let's focus on analysis because I think that's we've got to narrow it down. If you want to be in esports analysis, no matter the game title, what do you think are the three most important things you're going to need to have?
Delivery, first of all. If you can't get your words out, then who cares? Like what you like that's number one. If you I would say that I would intertwine that with like presentability, like make sure you look decent. People do get chances if they uh aren't, as like good looking, let's say. But like look at all the broadcast talent today. Like are you seeing anybody that's just like morbidly obese or are you seeing anybody that's like just like really disheveled, doesn't take care of themselves? The answer is no. So if that's something that you first need to be able to like look in the mirror and be like honest with yourself, what do I need to change about my appearance? And that I'm not trying to like push body dysmorphia on anybody, but it's just like be like I was like technically by BMI standards, I'm actually overweight. Like I'm technically overweight, but it's just like I'm muscular. I'm muscular and I do eat a good amount, but I work out a lot. Whatever. Either way, like I would say that like if when I started during the pandemic slipping because I just started eating a lot and not working out, I was like, okay. I looked at myself in the mirror and I was like, yo, I need to change that. So that's part of delivery, that's part of presentability. The other two things I would say are for being an analyst is that make people excited. Like get someone excited. Say something of note. Like say something. Either you can do that in a couple ways too. You can either come up with an opinion that many people aren't paying attention to, or work harder than anybody else. Look through all the demos. Look through the POVs. Find something out that you truly believe based off of the evidence in that game that you watched, and then tell the audience that because they're the thing is that like what people also don't do necessarily in this space is people don't watch demos. Like people aren't looking back at these individual POVs. That's why I still can have like a leg up in conversations a lot of time because I'm looking back at these demos so frequently that I know what this person did that wasn't shown on the broadcast, and so I can bring that to the table, and it's almost irrefutable because like I'm pretty sure nobody else is watching some of these things. So if you're able to bring that extra level of analysis, you're also going to be valuable because you're catching stuff and you're doing more homework than anybody else. Um, Third, I would say just like keep up your brand in other ways. Like make sure either have a really good Twitter game, YouTube game, Twitch game, or just be a player. Like those are a few of your roads to like keeping your name in the conversation because if someone is just an analyst, it is so hard to stay afloat. Like even just think of all of the other what I would consider like top tier analysts that have been working at majors lately. And let's just say Maniac X Pro also has like a pretty solid stream. Pimp, probably one of the biggest streamers in CSGO, period. Yanko, I'd say Yanko was like a big exception where he wasn't really doing as much, but then he was actually a coach of FaZe. And then he was also more recently, he's doing one of the biggest podcasts in the space too. Like, we're all doing extra credit. We all have extracurricular work that we're participating in. And the people that aren't doing the extracurricular work, well, you're seeing them less. So it's as simple as that too.
I mean, it's attractive if you want to get hired. It is attractive to have a personal brand that comes in because you understand that their name is known. People have followed them. Maybe someone who's never watched your broadcast before is going to go, oh, but I love Yanko on that podcast. I mean, that's ridiculous. I know everyone who watches CounterStrike knows Yanko, but it's that idea of, okay, I want to come check that out. But I want to jump back to what you were mentioning as well about like sort of presentation because it isn't about necessarily looking like a model, but one of the things is when you work these esports broadcasts, what people probably don't know is that you work these ridiculously long hours. Being fit and healthy, yes, you look good on camera, but also you can survive those long days because it is really difficult to go 8 to 12 hours if you aren't in a good space physically and mentally, I suppose, as well.
I can't do anything but agree with you there. It's pretty tough to be in the you almost can tell like some people's fatigue is greater than others because I don't know if it's a mental thing. I would say it's a little bit of both. The body is directly related to the mind. And like so if you're more fit, you're going to be able to probably sit there for longer. You're okay with it. I guess the only insight I have on this is that basically for me, like when I think of fitness and I think of this space, it's pretty much a guarantee that you're not going to be able to follow your routines as well when you're at these events because of our ridiculous hours, like you're saying, up to 12 hours. I mean, it's even been longer than that before, but like, it's crazy. Like this is not an 8-hour shift where you get a 1 hour lunch break where you can like kind of like relax a lot at work like a lot of people do. Like no, you're pretty much like you should be glued to the screen, you should be ready to go at the drop of a hat in case you're needed. And with fitness, like I get way more fit. Like I lose weight, I get stronger, and I'm eating healthier when I am not working. Like I can it's easy. Like I've been in New York for like 3 weeks on vacation, and I am literally losing weight and I'm getting stronger because I'm just like, even though I'm going out a lot, like I am doing a lot, but it's still healthier than sitting in a room for 12 hours and just snacking on like M&M, peanut M&Ms and like drinking like 3 Red Bulls a day. And like, I'm just walking around more. my body is moving more. I'm actually getting to go to the gym for my whole routine as opposed to a little hotel dingy little gym where you just like get on the treadmill for 15 minutes and you're like, okay, at least I have endorphins to carry me. Like now, yeah, this, but the behind the scenes part of this lifestyle, or at least the day to day work, is not nearly as glamorous. Like we're not just sitting there getting like pedicures as we're just watching these games. Okay, like I wish I got a French Manny as I was like watching Cloud9 lose to Navi, but I'm not. You know.
I've had someone ask me before. They were like, "So do you and the analysts watch the games?" And I just sat there and I was so shocked because I was like, "What do you think we're doing? Like we're going backstage, like you said, having a manicure and a pedicure, taking a nap. Like there is a misunderstanding of what actually goes on in one broadcast day, and then these broadcasts run for like 3 weeks. But it kind of ties into my next question, which is, and this is a bit of a difficult one, I think, for most people to answer. But if you had to think about what is the hardest part about your job, what would it be for you?
Hardest part of my job is, I'd say, it's changed over time. It's changed over time. I would say that in the beginning, it was the stress and insecurity of everything we were talking about earlier, where not knowing if I'm gonna get that next gig, not knowing where my next check is coming from, do people like me in the space, trying to take every piece of criticism and even combing internet boards to like see what do people think about me, like why do they think that. I would try to parse the opinions of the general public in order to try to figure out what it is that people are gravitating towards, and I'll do more of that, and what do people have an aversion towards, and I would maybe do less of that. Over time, I've learned that the general internet community does not have valid feeds a lot of the time, and I have since moved away from doing that. I do it for different reasons now. It's more like for laughs, or to make YouTube content where I'll just criticize people that think they know what they're talking about. But it shifted now, and it's more been about the fact that last year I was away from home for like 170 days. And so I would say that the hard part is keeping up with relationships, friendships, and my social network in a meaningful way where it doesn't feel like I'm missing out on so much of what's going on with people that I consider close to me. And so that is probably one of the harder parts today. And I think that's kind of actually been expressed by a lot of talent over the years where it's like really hard to have a relationship. It's really hard to have kids in this space because you're so consistently just away. You're so consistently away. So like, someone like Anders, he's having to miss his kids' birthdays all the time and they're just like toddlers. That's got to be heartbreaking. I don't even know how that would feel because I've tried to work through just like relationships and friendships while I've been working in this space, and it's just harder. It's just yeah. I think that's really where it is for me now. I think some people would still cite the stress and like the fans pouring on you, but thankfully I have really thick skin, and I also know what I'm doing, and I'm trying to elicit this kind of response from people. So I'm not really too concerned about that.
It's so interesting though, because I mean, the fan thing is something that I've struggled with, where it is very difficult not to dive into the internet and get pulled into all of the commentary about whether people like you or they don't like you. But I found that directly correlated to a past relationship where I would be at home away from work and I'd be so obsessed with that internet stuff, and it ended up affecting those relationships because I was more concerned about how are people judging me on the internet? Am I doing the right thing? Am I doing the wrong thing? As opposed to going, okay, you've got 3 weeks at home now. Focus on the person you're with. And I blame some of that on, I mean, I blame a lot of it on myself and the way I handled it, but on those relationships, because you do become a little bit obsessed. Or I'm sure that this has happened to you in the past where you get back from a job, you don't know when your next job's going to be. So you become so focused on, I need to get content out, I need to be working, I need to be in everyone's faces, versus going, I need 2 weeks to just connect with the people that actually matter, who were here before all of this and who'll be here when all of this is gone.
Yeah, that's the double-edged sword of freelance, I'd say. That you get these giant these stretches of not working, and all of your 9 to 5 friends are jealous that you have all this time off, but back in the back of your head, you're like, how do I grind harder? How do I make sure that everybody remembers that I exist? Because during this player break, for example, I remember I made sure everybody remembered that
Oh
I
wait,
existed.
we were all on Twitter. Maui made sure that he dropped, like, every so often he went in, and I could actually imagine you doing this. Like, I can hear your giggle. You write the tweets, you press send, and then you probably went off to a restaurant and came back like 4 hours later and were like, let's see what we've done now. Or you went to sleep and woke up the next morning. That's how I imagine this has happened.
The way it usually happens, well, for the most recent debacle with Nafany and Simple, unfortunately, Nafany responded within like 20 minutes. So I didn't walk away in time, but I did reply. I did use Twitter for the next like 45 minutes, just glued to the screen, just writing replies, just, trying to be witty and just be funny and stuff like that. But then I did just bike to the gym, and then I just basically like went notifications off on that. Which is why I actually use Instagram a lot for fun, because I just like Instagram to me is fun. Twitter is like work. Like that's kind of actually this distinction I have. So that's why like I'm kind of like a serial Instagram story poster, because I find so much more joy. Like I feel like I'm using social media in the way that it's supposed to be used there, even though it is supposed to be like helping the brand a little bit. Whereas Twitter is like sometimes I'm just sitting there almost like for an hour and I'm just drinking like a coffee and I'm just like, how do I make this fun today? How do I make this interesting?
I think my favorite part, and you're probably the only person I can do this with, I'm doing all of these pre-recorded interviews for the podcast, and they'll come out in like 2-3 weeks after the fact. So there'll be some stuff that I normally have to edit out because it's not relevant anymore. My favorite is your Twitter interactions will live on in history. So I don't even have to edit this out because everyone will know exactly what you're talking about and what happened because that's what you do. You make like a really nice controversial little argument. You get everyone so riled up and then you go to gym. Let's get into the next question though, because I asked you what the hardest part about your job is. What would you say is your favorite part about your job?
Being someone that directly influences the space, feeling like my contributions matter. Um, I would say that one of my favorite moments over the last 6 months was when a fan came to me and he said, yeah, this was in Dallas. He wanted to buy me a drink at the bar, and then he told me that he and his friend, after I would do like hot take, point made, or even say things on the desk, him and his friend would jump on Discord after and they would discuss my takes and they would try to break down like, am I right? Am I wrong? What do they think about it? And he told me that that friend passed away recently, and that's why he really wanted to buy me a drink because he like I was a reason that they were able to find deeper connections because I was starting conversations between them. And that's exactly what I'm trying to do all the time. I'm trying to further people's appreciation for a community that they've dove so deep into that I'm okay with being a lightning rod because I know that I'm bringing the community together in these moments. Like if I can be the source of everybody's like news cycle of the day, if I can generate that news cycle when the rest of the game isn't doing it, then I feel like I'm succeeding because I want people to keep gravitating towards this space because at the end of the day, esports, sports is all escapism for a lot of people's real lives. And I want to make sure that they can fully indulge in that because I think it's a healthier outlet than say there's so many other vices that you could find yourself partaking in, and I would rather it be something that's a lot more innocent and a lot more stimulating, which is just watching a game and talking about it.
Thank you so much for sharing that story. Like what an incredible moment just to remind us all what this is actually about. Because I think that that is sometimes something we forget. And I remember years ago, Red Eye said this to me, where he was like, the moment you think you're the story and that you're not telling the story to someone who wants to hear it, then it's a problem. And that was something that stuck with me, that idea of like, we're just we're just here to tell a story to people who are so desperate to read that book or listen to it, because this is, like you said, it's their passion, it's their escape from everything else, and it's really important that we give them a good time. We don't know, you don't ever want someone to leave it going, I had to mute the desk, I was bored. You want people to feel that sort of emotion. If you weren't doing this, if this wasn't your job, where do you think you would be? What would you be doing?
The job I was directly looking for and strongly considering out of university, even going to the like MIT Sloan Sports Analytics Conference, was to work as an NBA analyst with the eventual hope to become a general manager in the NBA for one of the 30 teams or whatever. So probably that'd be pretty high on the list. Um, I guess broadcast talent in that space too, which I think is still a possibility in my lifetime. So maybe that. I don't really know. I think like I mean I studied statistics and philosophy, so like I had a lot of options. A lot of people that were in my classes just ended up working for insurance companies or pharmaceutical companies or the government, just pushing stats, pushing spreadsheets, and that would have paid better than an NBA analyst. So maybe I would have chose that. Also like consulting firms, I maybe iBanking, but like these are so much less glamorous, and I think that at the end of the day I was always going to follow my passion, and I think that probably would have led me to doing something more like NBA work. Yeah. Maybe like restaurant critic or movie critic. Like that's another dream job of mine. I would love to do that, but I would have to actually yeah, I don't know. Like any of those all seem possible to me.
I love how you were chosen. Like, if you were in the NBA, you would have to deal with all the attitude problems of the players, and if you were a restaurant critic, you would have to deal with all the attitudes of the chefs. It's like you purposely are gravitating towards jobs where you get to fight with people who won't like what you have to say. Maybe
Yeah, it's fun.
some some thought there, Maui. I feel like you're enjoying the jabs. I, for one, am glad that you're in esports broadcasting. I love working with you on a desk. I think that you bring something so different, so fun.
Likewise.
It's
Likewise.
just, I like the sass. For people who want to find out more about you, who don't know who you are, where can they find you on the internet?
Obviously, my Twitter is where I talk the most shit on at Mauisnake, and my YouTube it has uploads from time to time, also at Mauisnake. My Instagram is also at Mauisnake. Basically, every single version of myself is at Mauisnake, and so if you find that, it's probably me. I think there's weirdly been a couple like people that have been getting like Mauisnake 2 on different or Mauisnake 1 where they've like actually been taking the username but putting a number after it. I saw like a couple people on Twitch have that and I was like, what the hell? But no, I probably have the Mauisnake URL for any relevant website in my life.
That's Maui's job. And if you want to find out more about the jobs that you can enjoy in esports, and there is a focus on CounterStrike starting to come into this a little bit, and I apologize, it's just where my passion lies, then make sure that you hit the subscribe or the follow button on whatever platform you're listening or watching this podcast. And also, if you are on one of the podcasting platforms, giving it a star rating would be really great for me. Thank you very much. More people will find it and be able to listen. If you want to chat to me about anything you've heard or watched on the show, then make sure you hit me up on @TechGirlZA, which is who I am pretty much everywhere on the internet.